Steven Bartlett has built one of the most comfortable interview rooms on the internet. Every detail is intentional. The lighting feels warm. The music is chosen to make guests nostalgic. The cameras fade into the background. Even the air quality inside the studio is carefully managed because Steven believes people open up more when they're physically comfortable. And it works.
I spent 5 hours reading the research. I'm ready to go. I've watched all the videos. I know everything about this person. I know their kids, their favorite music, everything.
Some of the world's biggest CEOs, politicians, celebrities, intelligence officials, and self-help experts have walked into that room and shared stories they've never told anywhere else. But that's exactly where the bigger question begins. Because when someone feels completely safe, they also become surprisingly willing to reveal who they really are. Over the years, The Diary of a CEO has become much more than a business podcast. It's become a place where billionaires explain inequality. Politicians reshape public perception.
One of the great ones I take away from you is honesty.
Yeah, honesty is so powerful.
Health influencers promote controversial ideas. Former intelligence officers discuss classified subjects.
Take me to that earliest context so I can understand how and why you are the way that you are.
We were not safe there, and at one point we had these Revolutionary Guards come into the backyard. They were actually going after our neighbor's house, and one of their guns went off, and bullets went through our living room.
And millions of viewers walk away believing they've just witnessed complete honesty. But what if the podcast isn't exposing the truth? What if it's exposing something else entirely?
Americans underestimate what this place represents in its ideals, right? Which is if you build something, it's yours, there's a rule of law, it can't be taken away from you. That is not true for the majority of the population.
Not because Steven Bartlett is trying to deceive anyone, but because his interviewing style creates a space where guests often contradict themselves without ever being challenged.
1 million drivers' careers that you have will be out of work, conceivably, talking about being honest about the situation.
That isn't necessarily bad journalism. In fact, it's part of what made the show one of the biggest podcasts in the world. The real question is whether that same formula also creates a new kind of media.
What do the 9 million people do?
I don't know.
One where confidence can sound more convincing than evidence. And once you start looking closely, a pattern begins to appear. The formula that built the empire. Steven Bartlett has never hidden his philosophy. In The Diary of a CEO, he often talks about the importance of preparation.
I've not been able to get an answer on that, really, I think, from the experts in AI that I've interviewed, which is like, what do those 70 or 80% of people do?
Before an interview, he researches his guest for hours, sometimes learning about their family, childhood, favorite music, and career in remarkable detail.
To me, the most important skill in life is a skill of working hard. When you see the top athletes, look at Ronaldo, look at Michael Jordan, etc. Of course they're talented, and their talent level is world levels. But the thing that changes that's different about the elite athletes than the non-elite athletes, and I'm talking elite, is they work their asses off. Now that anyone can vibe code, just learn to work hard.
But one principle stands above the rest. In his own book, Steven writes that a great communicator should avoid unnecessary disagreement. At first glance, that sounds reasonable. Most people open up when they don't feel attacked. And that's exactly what happens on his podcast. Guests aren't interrupted. They're rarely forced into a defensive position. Instead, they're encouraged to keep talking. For viewers, it feels refreshingly different from the combative interviews we've grown used to. But that same approach creates an unexpected side effect. People often reveal contradictions without realizing it. One conversation illustrates this perfectly. Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi speaks movingly about growing up during the Iranian Revolution. He describes living with fear, watching bullets tear through his family's home, and learning how fragile security can be. It's a powerful story. He explains that this experience shaped his belief in property rights and the rule of law. To him, America represents a place where if you build something, it belongs to you. It's an inspiring message. But only minutes later, the conversation shifts to artificial intelligence. Steven asks the question millions of people have been wondering. What happens to Uber's roughly 9 million drivers if AI eventually replaces them? ***. Dara's answer is surprisingly simple.
Countries you wouldn't live in, if you were Dave or Jenny.
I think I have to refuse to answer this on the grounds that it might tend to incriminate me.
Oh, okay. So you're saying don't live in the United States?
Well, I have American children and grandchildren.
Why not the United States?
I don't know. He acknowledges that AI will create new opportunities, but offers no clear explanation for the people whose livelihoods could disappear.
It holds out too much chance that the social contract is
Steven doesn't turn the interview into an argument. He doesn't accuse him of hypocrisy. Instead, he simply lets the moment sit. And suddenly, the contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. A CEO passionately defends economic security, while leading a company investing in technology that could fundamentally change the future of millions of workers. Ironically, that silence says more than an aggressive confrontation ever could. Later, Dara offers familiar advice. Work harder. Stay disciplined. Learn faster. He points to elite athletes like Michael Jordan and Cristiano Ronaldo as examples of relentless effort. For some viewers, it's motivating. For others, it feels disconnected from reality.
What he was is a construct. He's a created construct. Money, wealth, private jet, private island, fun, not married, young girls, lots of things. So he was a construct. The money, $500 million of money came from Les Wexner, who's a wealthy guy who owned, I don't know what he's doing now, Victoria's Secret. Big donator to the state of Israel. And $500 million was transferred to Epstein along with power of attorney.
So who is that ally?
Israel.
The comments quickly filled with frustration. Many questioned why ordinary people should simply work harder if automation is expected to eliminate entire professions.
There's no direct evidence, but what people are essentially doing is putting the pieces together to make a picture.
There is direct evidence. It's just not direct evidence I'm sharing at this moment.
Whether those criticisms are fair or not isn't the point. The important thing is this.
Sure, I mean, I could do it for 40 minutes, but everybody can just go to ChatGPT. And, if you ask ChatGPT, make the best case for. It's a good thing.
Steven never had to accuse his guest of anything. By allowing the conversation to unfold naturally, the audience reached its own conclusions. And once you notice that pattern, you begin seeing it everywhere on the show.
Exactly that, but as you said, I asked ChatGPT, make the best case for Epstein being an Israel spy. Here is what it said. The case that Jeffrey Epstein functioned as an Israeli intelligence asset rests on a pattern alignment.
When the guests started reinforcing each other, the pattern becomes even more noticeable when the guests aren't CEOs.
Not just me, by the way. You might already be there, and you've certainly had another guest sit here, and former CIA guy, Kirikow, how do you say his last name?
Yeah.
Am I close?
You're close. It's closer than I would get.
Okay, good. And he was point blank insane.
But former intelligence officials. Over the past few years, the diary of a CEO has featured several guests with backgrounds in intelligence, national security, and government.
The FBI has identified 187 undeclared Israeli intelligence officers spread all across the United States, mostly at defense contractors trying to steal our secrets.
Do you think Jeffrey Epstein was a spy?
I believe very strongly he was a spy, yes.
And who do you think he was working for?
The Israelis. I'm confident it was the Israelis.
Why?
Jeffrey Epstein is kind of the stereotypical example that they give you in training for what's called an access agent.
Each arrives with a compelling story. Each offers insider knowledge. And each appears to confirm what the previous guest suggested. Individually, that's interesting. Together, it creates something much more powerful. Not because new evidence is introduced, but because repetition itself begins to feel like proof. One example centers on Jeffrey Epstein. Security expert Gavin DeBecker describes Epstein as a carefully constructed figure, a man surrounded by extraordinary wealth, influence, and powerful connections. When Steven asks for evidence behind some of these claims, DeBecker admits there isn't direct evidence he can present during the interview. Instead, he suggests viewers can piece the story together themselves. At one point, he even points people toward ChatGPT to explore the theory.
Recruit a bunch of journalists, right? And local journalists, and I'm going to get them to publish stories, right? Maybe there's a radio station. I'll recruit somebody who can put stories on the radio. Technology has given the ability to do covert action campaigns, propaganda, disinformation, whatever you want to call it, a real jumpstart, right? So the concept is the same. I'm trying to influence opinion.
Steven doesn't simply accept that response. He asks the obvious question. If the evidence exists, where is it? The discussion ends without any new proof being shown. It's a small moment, but an important one. Because it highlights the difference between a compelling narrative and verifiable evidence. Yet only weeks earlier, another former CIA officer, John Kiriakou, had appeared on the same podcast. He confidently argued that he believed Epstein worked for Israeli intelligence. Again, Steven asked why. Again, the explanation relied largely on interpretation and experience rather than newly released evidence. Then came another former CIA officer. Mike Baker openly explained how intelligence agencies influence public opinion. Through journalists, media campaigns, and carefully crafted narratives. Ironically, he was describing the very mechanics of persuasion, while participating in one of the world's most influential podcasts. The pattern doesn't stop there. The show also explores UFOs, classified government programs, and alleged hidden knowledge.
All the things you've heard, Dan, what was the most compelling story or anecdote that you heard that convinced you?
It was really just the sheer number of very high-level military government intelligence officials who were telling me in private settings to my face, that at a classified level, they know with absolute certainty.
Filmmakers, former officials, and researchers describe conversations they've had behind closed doors. Military insiders say they know extraordinary things. Government sources supposedly confirm remarkable claims. And viewers are often told that more evidence is coming soon. But that evidence rarely appears during the interview itself. Instead, the audience is left with confidence. Confidence delivered by people with impressive titles. That's what makes these conversations so fascinating. They're not necessarily convincing because of the documents presented. They're convincing because respected people appear to agree with one another.
I've always been what I consider just the facts ma'am kind of guy, very, very data driven. I don't really care about innuendos and suppositions and your opinion very much. I care about what the data says. If I was in a court of law and I was presenting this as evidence, we are well beyond reasonable doubt. The jury would have no choice but to convict.
And when multiple authority figures repeat similar ideas, many viewers naturally begin treating those ideas as established facts. Whether those conclusions are ultimately correct isn't the central issue. The larger question is how easily repetition, credibility, and confidence can shape public belief, even when the supporting evidence remains incomplete. And this pattern extends far beyond intelligence stories. It also appears in another area where trust can be just as valuable. Health, wellness, and personal expertise.
Using him as a useful idiot to just get out some silly story because they're covering up for the fact that there's some very advanced drone system that the United States government has that trying to keep under wraps.
The business of trust. The same pattern appears again when the conversation shifts from intelligence to health, self-improvement, and entrepreneurship. Many of Steven Bartlett's guests aren't just experts. They're also authors, founders, coaches, doctors, people with products, courses, supplements, or businesses connected to the ideas they're discussing. One example is Jay Shetty.
You were saying that you think they wanted you to be weaker in public perception because that kind of keeps you in your place?
I think that was part of it. I do. I think that they decided that, there are far too many people in this world and in professional life who approach things with a zero-sum game.
During their conversation, Shetty explains that being a former monk and running a successful business aren't contradictions. He says spirituality and entrepreneurship can complement one another. Steven gives him room to fully develop that idea. He rarely interrupts. He lets the audience hear the argument in its strongest form. For supporters, it's inspiring. For critics, it raises difficult questions. Not long after, journalist John McDermott published an investigation in The Guardian examining parts of Shetty's public origin story. Among the claims discussed were questions about how long Shetty actually spent in India during his years as a monk, along with concerns surrounding credentials promoted through his coaching programs. Those allegations sparked widespread debate online. Whether viewers agreed or disagreed, one thing became clear. The podcast had helped amplify a public figure whose personal story later faced significant scrutiny.
Been lots of false deals. You flew out there to Pakistan and you flew right back. The deal wasn't done. I think I saw a report the other day that said the president has said roughly 30 times that there's a deal done or that there's a deal on the table. Usually on a Sunday, then it's not.
The same dynamic appears in health-related interviews. Psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Amen argues that brain scans reveal hidden problems traditional psychiatry often misses. During the interview, he analyzes Steven's own brain scan, linking certain patterns to personality traits and past experiences. To many viewers, it sounds remarkably precise. But outside the podcast, critics, including neuroscientists and other physicians, have questioned whether these scans provide the level of diagnostic certainty that's often implied.
There was a private message between you and your roommate where you said he was either a cynic asshole or America's Hitler. How do you go from that position to vice president of the same person?
A crazy journey, man. But I thought Donald Trump would be a failed president if he got elected. He was not. I thought that America's institutions were fundamentally functioning. They were not. I thought that the military leaders who told us this about a war were the scientific experts who told us this other thing about a pandemic. Fundamentally wise people who were mostly right.
Some argue the evidence remains insufficient for many of the claims being made. Others point out that the scans can cost thousands of dollars while leading to treatment centered around products and supplements sold through Amen's own business. The controversy isn't hidden. It's simply absent from the interview itself.
No understanding of that from him from the outside. What I would see is, clips of him arguing with a journalist, and that was it. And that gives you a very, very one-dimensional view of a person. So yeah, I definitely from the inside have seen a much, much more multi-dimensional figure. And the entire American media in 2016 had convinced me, at least, that he was not a smart person.
That doesn't mean Steven agrees with every claim. At moments, his facial expressions reveal genuine skepticism. He even asks whether certain conclusions are widely accepted. But the conversation rarely becomes a sustained challenge. Instead, viewers hear the guest's perspective almost uninterrupted. And that style has enormous commercial value. Guests leave feeling respected. Authors sell books. Founders introduce companies. Experts promote ideas. Everyone benefits from a calm, welcoming environment.
I enjoy being a monk as much as I enjoy understanding media. And that's really paradoxical for a lot of people, but that's just my truth. I enjoy building a business and learning about what it takes as much as I learn trying to understand how to meditate deeper and go internal. I enjoy and appreciate what I gain from all these pursuits. And I see them as being this beautiful, symbiotic, synergetic combination of learning and life and experience.
Steven himself has also invested in several companies featured on his platform. One notable example is Zoe, a personalized nutrition company. After interviewing its founder, Steven later announced that he had become an investor. In 2024, the UK's Advertising Standards Authority ruled that one of his advertisements for Zoe was misleading because it failed to clearly disclose his financial relationship with the company.
Society will give you a label. They'll say, okay, you're a monk. So act like and behave like a monk. We know what monks are. Here's the instruction manual of being a monk. And if you do anything other than the instruction manual there, then they'll say contradiction. They'll say, you're a monk. How do you live in LA, Jay?
Yes.
You have a nice home. You make money. Society then tries to enforce. And if you step outside of the implicit instructions of the box that we've labeled you in, we go fraud.
I grew up with the belief for a long time that if you were truly spiritual, you had to be poor, you had to have nothing, you had to be completely detached and disconnected. What if everyone in the world had access to what I have access to as a monk? That needs staff, it needs employees, it needs 8 cameras, it needs a microphone, it needs people, it needs teams, it needs
A similar issue surfaced with Huel, another business Steven publicly supported while also holding an investment. To be clear, investing in companies isn't inherently unethical. Many entrepreneurs do exactly that. The real issue is transparency. When audiences trust a host, they naturally place more weight on the products, experts, and ideas that host appears to endorse. And that's where the Diary of a CEO becomes more than just an interview show. It's an ecosystem built on credibility. A place where trust itself becomes one of the most valuable assets in the room.
So this was an experiment done on 2 groups of weightlifters. They lifted no weights for 2 weeks. They just sat there and they visualized themselves lifting weights, and they had a 13% increase in muscle mass.
Interesting.
People should realize how much potential they have in their brains, like how capable they are.
The bigger question about modern podcasts. By now, a clear pattern has emerged. Whether the guest is a billionaire, a politician, a former intelligence officer, or a best-selling health expert, the format stays remarkably consistent. Steven Bartlett creates an environment with almost no friction. His guests feel comfortable. They speak at length. They tell deeply personal stories. And more often than not, they leave looking thoughtful, authentic, and trustworthy. That approach has helped build one of the biggest podcasts in the world. But it also raises an uncomfortable question. What happens when trust becomes the product? Today's audiences are increasingly skeptical of traditional media.
Your prefrontal cortex is flat, and I don't like that. And then when I heard you played soccer, or when I read you played soccer, it's very common in my soccer players. How long did you play soccer for? And decreased activity in your left temporal lobe. And you right-handed? Yeah. So that can go with the irritability.
Many people no longer believe television networks or major newspapers tell the full story. So they turn to podcasts instead. Podcasts feel different. Long-form conversations seem more honest. They feel less scripted. More human. But being less confrontational doesn't automatically make something more accurate. A 3-hour conversation can still leave important questions unanswered. A confident guest can still be mistaken. And a compelling personal story is not the same as verified evidence. That's the balance every viewer has to navigate. To Steven's credit, he has never claimed to be a prosecutor or an investigative journalist. His role is to create conversations.
Looking by asking them questions, by doing some
That's
validating
complete crap, Mike. So from the beginning of the time, I've done imaging, and that's why I write. That's why online you can take our brain health assessment, know what, based on our work, what type of brain you have. You have a balanced brain, a spontaneous brain, that's my ADD group, a persistent brain, my OCD group, sensitive or cautious brain. So these symptoms tend to go with these patterns. So I think people can benefit from my work for free, right? They go to the library and get Change Your Brain, Change Your Pain, or Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, or any of the 40 books I've written, or they can listen to our podcast.
And in many cases, those conversations are genuinely fascinating. Ironically, some of the podcast's strongest moments happen precisely because Steven doesn't interrupt. Guests sometimes expose contradictions on their own. They make bold claims. They defend controversial positions. And viewers are free to decide what they believe. But there's another side to that freedom. When controversial ideas are presented with little resistance, the audience often fills in the missing pieces themselves. Authority begins to replace evidence. Repetition begins to replace verification. And familiarity begins to feel like truth. Perhaps that's the most important lesson from the Diary of a CEO. This isn't simply a story about Steven Bartlett. It's a story about modern media itself. About how podcasts have become one of the most influential sources of information in the world. About how credibility is earned. How it is borrowed. And sometimes, how it is sold. The biggest question isn't whether Steven Bartlett is right or wrong. It's whether we, as viewers, have become too comfortable confusing a great conversation with the complete truth. Because in the end, the most valuable skill isn't believing every confident voice. It's remaining curious enough to keep asking questions, even after the interview is over.